Do you continue to find yourself playing a mental game in a spiritual world? Are you like that little kid that is asking a lot of questions, around the age of 3 years old, and it's like, but why? But why? Every time you give an answer, but why? But why? Well, my name is Nancy Rebecca. I'm a registered nurse, but I am a clairvoyant psychic who people have come to me for years for healing to help them with all kinds of things that might interfere with their ability to be in the flow and function in optimal ways in this thing that we call life. So, being mentally hungry to constantly have answers, to constantly being fed, is at a all-time high now, more than it ever has been. I've been teaching intuitive development for a long time. It's not uncommon that one of the things that I get my students to work with is how do they override that doubt and that criticism and the judgment and the ego and the perfectionism, really wanting to get things right, and trusting and having faith that their spirit has the answers for them. I'm used to working with students at that level. But what I'm finding in the last couple of years is that mental desire to understand God or to understand spirit or to understand how the spirit world works, that type of mental pressure is becoming higher and higher and higher and higher. And what I will say is, it's impossible to understand the spiritual world. It's impossible for me to understand the spiritual world. I'm in a human body. My process is going to go through my human mind. We are naturally limited in just how much we can possibly understand because the spiritual world is extremely multidimensional. Your own spirit is highly multidimensional. And so right now we're really struggling a lot as we're trying to cope. Our mind is attempting to help cope for us. So, did you know that a literal mental way of thinking is a coping mechanism? Did you know that being really literal and having a mind that always needs to understand everything is a survival mechanism? And so, what do I mean by that? Well, what it means is that when maybe you were growing up as a child and you had parents that were saying, hey, you better get this right or you're going to get a whooping, or we told you not to put the glass that way. It was going to fall over and spill everywhere and then you get in trouble. We told you that you needed to put your pants on this way, or you needed to wear a coat, or you're going to get cold. So those are very light ways that we've had those parental influence about we better get right or we're going to get in trouble. But there's others of you who've lived in families that are very controlling. They can be very suppressive. They can be very oppressive. They can have standards and rules in that household that are tight, tight, tight. Now, don't get me wrong. I know children do really well with structure. We know this. But within that structure, you want to allow some time for them to play with trying to figure things out on their own. I was reading an article the other day where it said that my husband and I made an agreement when our daughter was born we would not interfere with focus time. And they were showing the little girl who's trying to button her sweater, and that it probably took her a good 30 minutes to get the buttons as crooked as they were. And I thought, wow, as a mother, I would have said, hey, do you want me to help you with this? So it's like giving that little girl time to have that focused attention and figure it out for herself. So we need to build that into structure as well. Or we don't want to fail, or we're comparing ourselves to a friend who's always, getting things right and always succeeding and is always the quarterback of the football team, or they make the cheerleading squad. So we're always comparing to them. So we're mentally trying to up our own game so that we can do better and maybe get more attention. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. Fear of failure, I said, and that need to get that measurement right, because we know if we're cooking a recipe or baking a cake, you need to get the ingredients measured just right to have the best outcome. And so we have been taught that the smarter you are and the more that you've studied and the higher class of level of education that you have has much more meaning than maybe those of you who didn't graduate from high school. You've got those good street smarts. We know a lot of people who didn't graduate from high school who've gone on to be highly successful in their life. So when I'm talking about, are you playing the mental game in a spiritual world, our spiritual frequency is rising so rapidly. The influences from the planets are really super accelerating our spiritual development. Well, what's happening is there's a lot of pressure on the mind. The mind really only knows that old way of navigating through life, and that's by getting smarter and being able to figure things out with their mind. So what I know is in the olden days, in the old days, the harder you worked and you showed you were a good worker, you would always have a job. And then we got into this educational system where if 5 people applied for this high-level corporate job, the person that graduated from Harvard or Yale or some of these other high-level universities would instantly get their resume snatched up, and they would get hired instantly long before anybody else. Because why? We valued the intelligence of those universities and the guarantee that those universities are going to produce people who can think at very high levels. But then they found out that you might be able to think at a high level, but you can't socialize with other people. You might be able to think at a high level, but you can't manage your triggered emotions when your rage gets triggered and suddenly you're screaming at everybody and you're throwing chairs across the room. So then they kind of grew into, all right, it's great to have somebody who's smart and went to a really good college, but they need to have emotional intelligence as well. And so then what ends up happening, and you can look it up, emotional intelligence, EI is what it goes by. And all these books started coming out about emotional intelligence. And so then in these big companies, they would have you take a test for these high-level positions to make sure, hey, not only are you smart, but can you manage your emotions in the most intense situations? And so that really helped for a while. But now what they're finding out is intuitive intelligence is the next big thing that a lot of companies are looking for. Why? Because they found themselves in situations where an investment project looked great on paper, and emotionally it looks like, oh, we're going to be making a lot of money, and it looks like we're going to get a lot of benefit, and we're going to really grow rapidly, and everybody's on board. But you can have this one employee over here saying, I know all that looks good, but I have my gut instinct is saying, hey, why don't we hold off for a couple of months? And they're like, nope, we need to jump on this now. This is what the charts say. And then they go ahead and invest in it. And then it collapses and they go bankrupt. And they go back to that person and they say, what made you think we needed to hold off for a couple of months? And it's like, well, my intuition told me, my gut instinct told me, and it turned out that it was right, but they didn't listen to it. So now they're finding that, yeah, being smart, being able to problem solve is great. Being able to manage your own emotions is even better. But wow, if you can have emotional intelligence, that's up there right now. And you can look that up. There's a lot of corporations, businesses that are looking for that. So, playing a mental game, are you still trying to play a mental game in a spiritual world? So, as I said, as the spiritual frequency rises, the mental pressure is building, and a lot of people are really finding themselves needing to think. And we get fed a lot of mental information over the internet. So, your mental energy can block intuitive information. So your spirit can intuitively give you some information, which the perfect time is in the morning. That intuitive information comes to the surface, and right away your mind says, nope, I need to shut that down, or nope, you can't do this and you can't do it that way. It doesn't make logical sense. That's pretty typical of what the mind will do. So I just want to share a little story with you about, I lived in South Africa, and I lived there in a Zulu cultural village. So it was a place where tourists came and universities came and elementary and middle school and high school students came to learn about the Zulu culture. So they would have these thatched huts, and they would have the cattle, and they would have it built in this kind of circle. So people came from far and wide to visit. I lived on the other side where the staff lived. I had my own hut that I lived in. So I was teaching intuitive development. As a matter of fact, that's where I really started organizing classes and teaching it there, because a lot of the people really wanted to learn how to be intuitive. So one day there was this phone call that came through, and one of my friends who had a house in town, he answers the phone and he says, Nancy, there's a priest on the phone and he wants to talk to you, and you're in big trouble. And so that was his humor, to say, you are in big trouble. And so I get on the phone, and there were actually two priests on the phone, one on the extension. And they wanted to talk to me because some of the people in their congregation, they said quite a few to be exact, were taking my intuitive development classes. And they said they're actually getting better. That problems that they had are improving. Their abilities to socialize with each other are improving. Their ability to self-reflect and self-problem solve was improving. And so they said, we really want to meet you because we want to know, what are you doing? Like, what are you teaching them? So we set a date for them to come visit, and my friend's house in town, he had a swimming pool. So we were going to set up outside by the swimming pool. So my friend joked with me saying, if I come home later and there's holy water everywhere, we're going to know what happened. Because he just thought I was in big trouble for teaching intuitive development. But here's the thing. This is what happened. So we're having this conversation. We're going back and forth, and the priest want to know. They were very, very nice people. They wanted to know about the classes and what I teach and how I teach it. And so one of the priests said, all right, let me see if I've got this straight. So you believe, Nancy, that we are spiritual beings in a human body, and that we have an energy field where you've got energy centers, and those energy centers and your spirit is filled with all the knowledge that has ever existed in the universe. And all anyone needs to do is to go into meditation, get quiet, ask the questions, and their spirit will provide the answers. And I said, yes, that's what I believe. And they were just like, oh my gosh, are you serious? So they said, all right, let's get this clear. So you do not believe that when a baby is born, it's an empty shell that you have to cram with knowledge its whole life? And I said, no, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. And that really shocked them because they that spiritual teaching, the spiritual knowledge, the spiritual books and all the training that they did, studying hours after hours after hours so they could recite anything, spiritual or religious that had ever been put in a book. The shock factor of thinking that it might even be possible that you have all the answers inside of you was very shocking to them. So we did have a good laugh about it, and I never saw them again, although they did say, we love it that our people in our congregation are coming to see you. They were not intimidated at all at intuitive development. So I share that with you because that's another kind of way of looking at life. It's like, yeah, if you've studied hour after hour, as a nurse, I was required to read 200 to 400 pages a day as I was going through nursing school. And no, I probably wouldn't be able to use my intuition to operate on somebody. I'll give you that. But there needs to be a balance. So let me just give you some insight before we wrap up here. If you are being overly mental, have analysis paralysis all the time, or you're one that needs to be fed, that you're over hungry, you've kind of got that hunger to always have knowledge fed to you by somebody else. So this is how it looks in the energy field. So when you're born, and what do parents do right away? They want to start showing you the colors and the tactiles and the how to walk and how to crawl and the rules. Don't touch that. That's hot. Don't walk in the street. Those are all good rules. But it's like a swim cap comes over the top as the parents are teaching the child the rules to go by. And then as you get older and you start school, not only do you have your parents' rules, but now you have more of the teacher's rules, and you're in middle school and you're in high school, and maybe if you're fortunate enough to go to college to do what you love to do, that's your professors. There were energy caps of professor's energy that was so thick on this one particular woman that I had met who had her doctorate. I don't know what she had her doctorate in, mathematics or something. It's like it was so thick of all her professor's energy, it was making it hard for her to think. But let me finish my list here. So we have teachers. How about friends? Do you have friends that you admire, that you think are super smart? You trust their opinion more than your own? There goes the swim cap. How about TV personalities? The one fun one all the time is the Kardashians, right? So everybody likes to listen to them and their opinions and whatever they're doing. There goes that next tight mental cap on your head. How about doctors or nurses or attorneys or your boss at work or coworkers? Every time they are telling you how and why and what needs to happen and how you need to think, that can add more and more swim caps. But who adds the most swim caps to your mental head? You do. So you can say, all right, as a nurse, I probably need to be thinking like this. When I talk to the doctor, I need to I need to think and sound intelligent when I talk to the doctor. I need to know the patient's chart inside and out. I need to talk to the patients. I need to educate. I need to educate like this so that the patients can hear me. So you can see I'm putting all these caps on my head. And there were definitely some incredible nurses that I was working with that I envied how quickly they could process in an emergency situation. And it's like, I want to be like them. So you can build up all these mental swim caps. One time I saw someone, it was probably 20 feet high. It was so thick of mental energy. All right, so when you put your hand on top of your head, you've got your sixth chakra here, your mental and your brains here. Your spiritual higher self is up here. So the more mental energy you have built up, it pushes your spirit away. So then guess what happens when you're playing the mental game in a spiritual world? Your spirit gets further and further and further away, so that the sound of your spiritual voice, your intuition, gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you can barely hear it, but man, can you hear the noise of your mind. And so get quiet, find a quiet place, allow yourself to play with that imagery of peeling off those swim caps. Remind your mental energy of what today's date is, how old you are, how much life, spiritual life wisdom that you have available to you, and just start melting away that mental energy. And if you're interested in knowing what your intuitive style is, go right to my website, intuitivemind.org, and just put in your email address and you'll get a 9-page questionnaire so you can determine what your intuitive style is communicating to you. And if you want to go even further, you can click on the button that says Psychic Mastery 1. It's a year-long program. I only open it for new students once, maybe twice a year. So make sure that you put your name on the waiting list so that you will know the next time I open up that class for you, so you can start building your intuitive intelligence, because the world is going to be ready for you for sure. All right, everyone, thanks for tuning in, being in the river of life with me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next Intuitive Mind video. All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.